Course provides opportunities for learners to review their performance and assess their own learning throughout the course via pre-tests, self-tests with feedback, reflective assignments, peer assessments, etc. So we're going to talk about a little bit about these different types of assessments. Everybody is assessing what your course learning outcomes, right? They're usually referred to CLOs because they're specific to your course, right? Those are the outcomes that go into your syllabus. You may also have some SLOs, which are from general education. They're institutional level student outcomes. So your course is a general education course, that you might also have some SLOs. There's also different assessments we're going to talk about tonight. So the self-assessment reflective assignment, we've talked about reflective teaching, reflective pedagogy last week, and also now we're going to talk about it this week. The learner's self-efficacy really revolves around their ability to regulate their learning and understand how they learn, right? Metacognitively, how are they putting things together? The more they understand how they learn, the better they can put those skills to practice, and the better they retain each week in their understanding and mastery. So what does this mean? We're talking about a pre and post assessment, frequent and often assessment, peer assessment, self-assessments, and of course, midterm meetings. So we may see these in different forms throughout the course. And if you're missing any of these, now is the time to think about adding these as a powerful way for the students to self-assess their mastery and see their growth. If you have received the question in an SRI, I don't know why I took the course, I didn't learn anything, right? That is indicative of a lack of self-assessment within the course. The students never got a chance to self-reflect on their beginning and ending, so they don't understand how much they actually learned. Do the students meet mastery? It's a very effective way to measure the actual percentage of learning throughout the course. So at the very beginning, in the first week, you ask the students questions about the objectives and outcomes. They should get a 0, right? And you'll tell them that. You don't expect them to know anything. They're going to learn it in the course, right? So there's no worries about the 0 pre-assessments. You just get points for doing the pre-assessment, not the actual test. It's not a test. In the pre-assessment, you can also ask them some demographic questions and about their challenges and their barriers to their learning. You can help them identify right at the beginning of the course what they think is going to be a barrier to their own learning, and then help them work through that as they walk through the course in their reflective practices. So this pre-assessment is very good to start them out. It also identifies learners that shouldn't be in your course. If they're getting an 80% in your pre-assessment, they are in the wrong course, right? They've already done the mastery, and you might want to work differently with those students. So all that goes into the pre-assessment, and then you give it to them again in the post-assessment, exactly the same. So it's 2 exact copies. You can measure the actual learning from their scores. So they may get a 0 on the pre, and then they might get an 80. So that they have been able to learn up to 80% of that course. So that's real measurable learning. And that's something that goes in the Nietzsche reports. It goes to the director of assessment. It goes into your chair. So it's really important. So these are important things to put in the course. And I'm really happy that they're working on the pre-assessment. The second version of this is really frequent and often assessments. And so you may or may not have not heard of this before. This sometimes is called the low stakes strategy, low stakes quizzing. Frequent and often assessment is a way for students to summatively test themselves so they can check their understanding. How much have they mastered? So frequent, we're talking about an activity that they can do at least once per week in which they can assess their understanding. Often means that they have multiple tries to take the quiz or do the activities to improve their scores. So to get a level of mastery, because that's what we want, right? Levels of mastery. And then they receive feedback from you overall about their growth towards mastery. So frequent and office assessments, it's also part of Caring Campus, another plug. If you didn't hear that earlier, Caring Campus next year. And so this is one of those strategies. Why? Because students who are first generation, students of color, students who are disabled, students who are marginalized, need additional ways to check their understanding. It improves their overall performance and does increase retention. So this is a great strategy to add to your course if you don't have it already. It is a switch, right? So this is formative. So you're not taking their scores, you're taking their performance. This is about their progress, not their performance, right? Summative is about their performance. Did they meet mastery, right? So these quizzes are often a formative assessment. They get a couple of points for doing it. You always give points for persistence, but it's not about their scores. The next one is peer assessment. So the more you add active learning, small group work, pair work, triad work into the course, now you're starting to add peer assessment. In order to effectively add work, collaborative work between students to your course, students need to know that it's fair. Most often when students complain, it's because their experience previously was unfair, meaning things happened and they had no voice. So peer assessment in a course that does small group work allows students to voice their concerns and share with you their experience. This gives you a lot of insight. I know when I did peer assessments, I was able to identify very quickly those in the groups that did no work versus those in the group that did all the work. And I was able to grade appropriately, and students were satisfied with their grades and scores for those activities. And they believed everything was fair. So they were able to invest more and more in the collaborative active learning work because they knew I would treat them fairly. And if they did all the work, they got all the score. Peers also, there's a lot, brings up peer pressure because they know that their peers will be assessing their performance. So it helps also to identify those students who don't like to participate. And always it's the student's voice. If they don't want to do it, then you can allow them to skip it. And you just have to figure out from the other group responses what really happened in that group. So you have to be careful when somebody doesn't submit something, but it's their voice. If they don't want to share it, that's the autonomy you're giving the adult learners. You're saying, I trust you as an adult learner. If you don't want to do the peer assessment, that is okay. However, your peers will be doing the assessment. So I really value your opinion. It gives me a unbiased view of the group work and who was collaborating and who was not. And then there's self-assessments. And so I didn't do too much about this one. We talked about it last time about reflective work, reflective activities like a journal that prompts for growth and mastery for the students. You're talking growth mindset. I highly recommend reading Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. If you have not read it before, it's fantastic. It really gives you a good understanding of your impact on the students, how permanent it is, which is really scary. Very good book. Also, when you're doing the reflective activities, when you get to the end of the semester, really important for the students to go back to their first journal entry and reread it. And what they often find is, wow, I've come a long way. And that's when you get really good responses and they understand the actual growth and learning that took place in the course. That gets rid of that question. I don't understand. I didn't learn anything in the course in the SRIs. That's the answer to that problem, is that they can identify readily how far they've come. This is always used in any kind of art class. They look at a portfolio. I highly recommend in any writing course. a portfolio where they go back and look at their original writing assignment to their end writing assignment and do a reflective activity. Very effective. They can't believe in the beginning what they drew or what they wrote and now what they're writing. So it's a great confidence builder, and it builds that self-regulating skills for them. OSCQR 5 talks about course includes the opportunity for learners to provide descriptive feedback on their experiences in the online course, the course design, content, user experience, and technology. So this is a chance for them to voice what they thought about your course. Now, the SRI is a good tool, but it's not really great. It doesn't really give you a lot about course design details, about what activity worked and what didn't. SRI is really general. Did you do your job? Yes, they did their job. So really, this is an opportunity to add to the course these practices. And so really, it's talking about getting useful feedback from them on their experiences as a student in your course and how this is part of the continuous improvement, right? I've met with a lot of you for OSCQR, and I'm always talking about iterative improvement, continuous improvement. And so these activities are part of that. And what are we talking about? We have the SRI is somewhat useful sometimes, but we're really talking about an end of course feedback, and we're talking about formative feedback. So when we're talking about end of course feedback, we're really talking about you putting together a survey, a feedback survey at the end of your course. And when we're talking about formative feedback, we're talking about opportunities where you've made change, right? So you flip your course to spring and you've made a change in activity assignment number 4. And you're not certain how it's going to go. So after activity 4 or assignment 4, you provide them with a short poll or a short form or a journal entry. We're going to talk about some of the other technologies to get their general understanding. Did it go well? Did it not go well? So there's actually pedagogy that we've talked about before, exit ticket. So we've talked about this before, where you basically collect their feedback in a ticket, whether it's in person, online, or hybrid. You can do a survey, anonymous survey. In Blackboard, it does have an anonymous survey tool, and you can download that information easily from the grade center, or you can use other tools for that exit ticket. There are something called 3 things. You basically ask learners to share 3 things about the course, 3 things about what worked well, and 3 things that didn't work at all. You can do it multiple times during the course. Again, you can use Blackboard journals, you can use Blackboard survey tool, and there are other tools out there that you can use, polling tools. There's a lot of free polling tools that you can develop. You also can use Microsoft Form as long as you make the form available to anybody who has the link. So there's an option to make it available to everybody. As long as you do that, they should be able to fill out those forms. If it says only people from CCRI, though, because they are from my CCRI, they won't be able to do the form. So make sure you click that in the settings. There's also a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's what that SWOT is. There's a lot of material online about how to do a SWOT. You can ask them specific questions about the course, what really hindered them, where they felt threatened, like where they felt they weren't going to make it, right? That's an important bottleneck in the course to identify. If students felt like they weren't going to make it, that's probably a place where you need to look at your course design and see what's going on there. So SWOTs are also really good because not only talk about weaknesses, but they talk about the student strengths. I learned this. I was able to do this really well. Weaknesses. They may say, I had a really hard time submitting things. It wasn't clear, right? So it can help you that way. Poll Everywhere is free. It gives you a certain amount of polls, and you can distribute your surveys or polls that way. My favorite product is Socrative. If you're interested, it is a great tool to have. However, it is paid for the teacher, free for the student. So it's not that bad, but it is a monthly subscription, unfortunately. So if you're looking for your department to get a tool, Socrative is that tool. It's a pretty amazing tool. You can use it a lot. You can use it in classroom, hybrid, and as well as online. So everybody in your department will be able to use that. So that's it for tonight. We're going to put some extra examples of some of these things up. You can take a look at those, as well as other strategies. Last week, I gave you like a long list with a lot of links of different types of active learning strategies over the last 3 weeks. And some of those are going to be more reflective as well, that you can use for these exit ticket type things, right? So it's either going to be end of course feedback or formative. You're checking on your course design, experimental course design, right? I have a pre-assessment, a post-assessment, and an end of course feedback for every course I teach. I ask for attitude. One of the things you can ask for is attitude in your end of course feedback, which you often don't get from SRI. So you can measure, I am confident now I can answer this. I am confident now that science is important. I'm confident now that I am going to be successful here at CCRI. So you can test for attitude in your course feedback, which is often helpful to understand really the impact you've had on the students emotionally as well as cognitively.